Obamacare. Ain't nobody got time for that.
Stupid people are ruining America.
The president just wants to take care of you. He just doesn't think you're able to do it for yourself.
There's a very thin line between communism, progressivism, Marxism, socialism.
The empire will strike back.
You still don't know that this was political.
Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of America Our Way. I am your host, Dustin Hoyt. It's been an interesting day today for those of you who have been watching the news. We had a plane crash / shot down / Cold War thing repeat. We've had immigration issues, there's been protests, Congress is about to hit a hard deadline, all kinds of stuff. It's been a busy week since last Thursday. So, I want to start off with immigration because I feel like that's the topic that is most concerning to most Americans, is immigration. It's the one that everybody's talking about. It's the one that people are feeling most strongly about. So I want to start there. President Obama was in Texas last week on Thursday. He came back in. He came to Dallas and Austin. He was doing some fundraising, and a lot of people noticed that he was avoiding the border. He met with Rick Perry in Dallas. They met in Dallas, didn't take a photo op or anything, and the president had said he's not interested in photo ops, he's interested in solving the problem. So he didn't go and visit the border, despite that being a huge problem these days. And of course that's because, you get the massive surge of unaccompanied minors crossing through illegally. Most of them, like we've talked about, being fair, they are fleeing violence from their home countries, fleeing violence in, Honduras, Guatemala, etc. And many Americans think that they need to be shipped back home, including the president claims to believe that as well. And of course, most of the Republicans in the country believe that as well. Now, the president, when he talked to Governor Perry on Thursday, was saying that he and Rick Perry had no philosophical objections. He said, quote, "There's nothing the governor indicated that he'd like to see that I have a philosophical objection to." Meaning he agreed, secure the border, deport the kids, etc. And, of course, that has yet to be seen, and that's because the Obama administration and Congress has a law signed by President Bush that means kids from Central America and Canada, basically not Canada and Mexico. Illegal immigrants who aren't from Canada and Mexico have to have hearings before they get deported to plead their case for asylum, so they're not shipped back to child slavery or child pornography or gang violence or whatever. And so the Obama administration is asking for $3.7 billion as a supplemental, is what they've been calling it, to address the border crisis. And roughly half the money, $1.8 billion, would be set aside just to care for the unaccompanied minors. It would be house, food, clothing, all that jazz. And most of the money will be to beef up border security. Most of the rest left over would be for border security. Now, Congress has to approve that money to make it happen. But many in Congress are saying that, Republicans are blocking the bill just because. They're saying it's too much money for one reason or another, and so they're not backing it. And that includes Texas Congressman Bill Flores. He's up here in Central Texas. He was saying throwing money at the problem is not going to fix it. That being said, probably most of the reason why we have a porous border is lack of funding being thrown at the border. I imagine if we had enough money to afford automated turrets that shot electrified nets with tracking devices attached to them, probably people wouldn't cross the border, as long as we're talking about throwing money. But, in the other form of throwing money, of course, would be stationing National Guard troops, which is something many people have called for, and that costs money. Building bases along the border, building new fencing, guard posts, just posts, all of that stuff, that costs money. It costs tax dollars. So the idea that you want to send the troops, you got to pay for that. That costs. It does. It costs money, and so for people to object for people to object to the president's bill because it's $3.7 billion and to not have a line-by-line analysis of that bill are being very hypocritical. I just want to point that out. Like, if you want to object to the president's supplemental, have a reason. Have a line in there explaining why you object. Now, that's not a shot at Bill Flores, because he actually did point something out. He said to News Channel 25 that one is to strip out non-essential items from the 3.7. For instance, apparently the president's got a $600 million earmark in there for firefighting funding, and nobody has asked for that. The Forest Service hasn't asked for that money. So he's got extra spending in there, and that's obviously a problem for many Republicans, is all this extra spending. Now, the other thing is that you've got Nancy Pelosi, who came out today, Thursday, and said, you Republicans are just saying no, you want it to be cheaper. Well, what needs to be cheaper? We can't just downsize everything. That sounds like an all-Republican bill. Basically making it partisan, saying that Republicans are cheapskates, and that needs to stop. But $600,000, excuse me, 600. Let me get them correct again. I don't want to mislead anybody. $600 million. That's what I thought. $600 million for firefighting is not chump change, and heaven forbid there's something else in the supplemental that is equally lavish or unasked for. I have not gone through the president's supplemental. It is a big chunk of reading, but I do know that one little bit is in there, and I do know that it really shouldn't be that difficult for... This is a problem I have with the federal government, is that when they see an issue, rather than solve it, they come up with a solution, get an estimate for the cost of that solution, and then just tape as much crap to it as they can. And this is a common practice for politicians. It's called poison pill legislation. And more often than not, the minority party will try to stick as much poison into a bill as they can so that when the majority votes for it, usually it's an omnibus bill, when the majority votes for that bill, they don't know what's in it, and they pass this stuff that's terrible for them, and then it makes it easier to run against these folks in elections. Now, while this isn't poison per se, in the strict definition, I would say it's poisonous in that the president thinks that Republicans can't afford to not pass an illegal immigration border security bill. And that's, if you live in Texas or you follow Texas politics at all, you know what I'm talking about. Every politician in Texas runs on this issue. If you're not strong on the border, you're not winning in Texas, period. The one fluke might be Ron Paul. And for the president and the Democrats to stick extra spending into this bill, it's got to be tearing Republicans apart because they don't know what to do. So this is one of those moments where John Boehner made the call not to vote for it. Like, let's try to refocus. Let's try to not make this an issue. So the Republicans are trying to bang their shields loudly and declare that it's all Obama's fault. Illegal immigration is Obama's fault. He's not doing anything. He caused this. He incentivized it. Stuff like that. And at the same time, you've got what appears to be a fairly reasonable solution, despite, $600 million to firefighter stuff, which I would agree should be. Why can't you just pass exactly what's needed? They're politicians, that's why. But I don't understand why the House couldn't pass something that had everything except the earmarks. I don't understand why John Boehner hasn't passed something like that. And a lot of that is something that has kind of presented itself, if you will. For example, you've got Texas Senator John Cornyn and Democratic Representative Henry Cuellar out of Texas, both of them Texans. One they are announcing. They've already announced and introduced joint legislation, one in the House, one in the Senate, that would reverse the 2008 law that's giving all of these illegal immigrant children hearings. So it's the whole reason they're being held here. They are they're trying to get rid of the hearings before the minors are sent back to their home countries, which would basically speed up deportation, which of course is going to be very contentious because Democrats don't want people to be deported. I mean, you had one of the Democrats come out today. Let me find this name for you before I declare it. Where did it go? Hold on, I have it right here. Let me find it. Luis Gutierrez, Democrat out of Illinois. He met with the president today along with the Latino caucus, and he was saying the pain that we feel about children at the border and the pain that we feel given that 1,000 people will be deported today and 2 million have been deported, that pain that our community is going, the destructive nature of our broken immigration system. So basically he's crying about how people who come into the country illegally are being deported for doing something illegal. And it's just one of those things where you can't help but feel like they are wasting everybody's time on this issue. The Democrats, they don't care. Like, they honestly want everybody to be able to stay. And I know a lot of Republicans are completely against that. They think illegal is illegal, period. And it's not really something that I feel as strongly about, because I kind of feel like Nazis when we're asking people for their papers no matter where they go. And this doesn't apply to just illegal immigrants, because when you crack down on illegal immigration like that, you run into this situation where you get paper checkpoints everywhere you go. And it's like it's like the border checks you see in California, where you get the border patrol people asking for your papers. And if you've ever watched the videos of that, it's ridiculous. As an American citizen, you have the right to travel unmolested. And as far as I'm concerned with the illegal immigration thing, I don't really have a problem with the border being sealed up at all. I kind of feel like countries dictating where people can live is pretty lame. But at the same time, I get the security thing. I mean, I get it. Because after September 11th, things changed. And so I'm not fully one side or the other on this argument. I get that these kids are fleeing adversity. Adversity is a weak word. These kids are raped and murdered in the streets, sold into slavery, and all kinds of horrific things happen. And we let it. And so it's impossible for me as a human, as a person with feelings, to say we need to just put them on a plane and send them back. Because when you do that, a percentage of them will be killed, a percentage of them will be raped, a percentage of them will become gang members, and a percentage of them are going to be killed, and all of this stuff. And you know that rate goes way up when they leave America. I mean, I don't have a feasible solution for them to stay, but at the same time, I do think it's terrible to argue just put them all on a plane and send them home. I mean, granted, it's pretty ridiculous to have an entire generation of kids abandon their countries rather than fight to change it, but that's kind of the world we live in now. It is almost impossible for people to even fathom, to even come to the conclusion that they can change their country, that they can change their government. People don't come to those conclusions anymore, and so they would rather just abandon it and escape to America. And America has its problems, very big problems. Most of them are named Democrat. But you can't help but have this compassion for these kids, because you know that in the age of tanks and machine guns and drones and cyber surveillance, there's not a real way to change a country short of getting 80 to 90% of the people to stand up with you, and you're just not going to see that happen. We'll have more after this.
This is Ed Morrissey of HotAir.com, and you're listening to Vigilant Liberty Radio.
This is Liz Harrison, and you know, I have no idea how many times people have told me conservative women can't be sexy. Well, we can prove them wrong. Listen here on Vigilant Liberty Radio, Friday nights at 11 p.m. Eastern, the Conservative Feminist Show, where the ladies are kink-servative.
We are back, ladies and gents. Now, there is something else I want to talk about today. It is legal stuff. I know it sounds terrible, but it's really not. See, for those of you who have not been paying too close attention this week, on Wednesday, Senate Democrats introduced a bill. Wednesday's yesterday, by the way, for those of you who don't know the day of the week or are listening later on. On Wednesday, Senate Democrats introduced a bill trying to overturn the Supreme Court's decision and require all contraception to be covered for women who get their health insurance from their employers. Republicans, however, blocked it by, I think, 2 votes, and it didn't go through. Now, obviously, since the Supreme Court already ruled, hey guys, you can't do that, Democrats were doing nothing. They were accomplishing nothing. And as such, it would have failed in the House anyway. It was one of these political stunts, kind of like voting to repeal Obamacare 57 times, or however many it was, that means nothing. It was a political stunt that meant not a single thing, because it is impossible for them to pass that. It won't work. They would never have gotten it ever through the House. Those things just, it wouldn't have worked. It would not have worked, ladies and gents. Would not have worked. And it's just interesting to see, because the Democrats are very stuck on selling this whole idea that Republicans are trying to deny coverage of health care coverage, of contraception coverage to women. And the whole Hobby Lobby ruling was only about 3 types of out of 18 or something contraceptives. I mean, they still cover over 15. So, quit your crying. Men, women, Democrats, liberals, stop crying about it. This is stupid. This is so stupid. This whole argument, like, Republicans are trying to tell women, what to do with their bodies, and they're just trying to force their religious beliefs on us, and how dare they take away a woman's right to choose? Oh, like, shut up. It's not even remotely a feasible argument. It is idiotic and parroted by idiots, and it appeals to idiots. The whole thing is stupid. They said that a person who owns a business or people have a right to object to contraceptives, some contraceptives, on religious grounds. If you are going to abort your fetus, your hyper-Christian boss doesn't have to pay for it. That's not outrageous by anyone's standards. If I am a vegan, I'm not buying you a hamburger. I don't care how hungry you are. If you're a Democrat, I'm not going to drive you to the polls so you can vote. I don't want you to vote. And it's not my job to make you vote. Do we understand how simple that is? I do not expect my Democrat boss to pay for my ammo. Because I like ammo, and it's my right to shoot ammo, so my boss should pay for my ammo. Technically, he does. It's called a paycheck. So the idea that this is a valid political argument, the idea that millions of Americans are hearing these arguments about Hobby Lobby and thinking to themselves, those damn Republicans can't stay out of a vagina. How? How is it that people hear this and don't understand? I mean, it's one of those facepalm moments where you just slap yourself in the head. Just, how are people this stupid? This is America. Nearly everybody can read. Almost everyone can write. We can't be this dumb. We can't be. And unfortunately we are. Millions of us. And I just feel sorry for the next generation and kind of think that maybe most of them shouldn't be able to breed just for a safety issue. How do people remember to breathe? How do they remember to wipe themselves when they get done with the bathroom? I mean, do they forget to put on pants on a regular basis? Do they walk outside just naked, forgetting to be clothed? I mean, we have to start thinking like this if they're really that stupid. I mean, these people are probably not legally eligible to make their own decisions if they're really that dumb. And yet, for whatever reason, that's the party that holds a majority. And that's an argument that actually wins out with voters. This is something that Republicans need to jump all over. If they expect to win anything or ever be taken seriously, this is an argument that is easily taken down. I mean, with many of the feminist arguments in Western countries, you run into issues like the fact that the wage gap is due to them choosing lower paying jobs, leaving for years on end to raise kids, and not negotiating for higher salaries in competitive markets. And when you look at men and women who work the same jobs, the inequality rate is 99% equal. They make 1% in markets less or more. Or, 1% less than men. They make 1 cent less. And that's averaged across all fields, not including tenure and experience and all those things. So this is just one more argument from the left on the women's agenda that is easily debunked. You just have to have the balls, or the ovaries, if you will, to come out and say, hey, you guys are full of crap, let me tell you why. Or put it nicer so hopefully they'll vote the way you want them to. Either way, I'm not I am not one of these people that comes out and berates others. I tell you what, my favorite statement to make to avoid an argument is one that makes me laugh every time I say it, because if I'm laughing, I'm not concerned with intellectually destroying you and causing you to question your own existence or intelligence. My favorite thing to say in an argument with someone is, you can believe that, you're wrong, but you can believe that, or you're allowed to have your own opinion. It's a wrong opinion, but you're allowed to have your own opinion. And of course, opinion usually is a factual-based conversation in politics that people think is opinion, but in reality is just misinformed fact. But c'est la vie, it is what it is. And until we get people that are gutsy enough to stand up and say, hey, you're kind of stupid, let me show you why you're wrong, and who aren't afraid to reach out and teach people things, we're just going to keep on with this culture of stupidity, just mass stupidity. And that's just the way it's going to be until we get more courageous. And so, with this whole Hobby Lobby bill failing, Texas Senator Ted Cruz came out and said this is one of the saddest developments in the Senate. It's really not. It's expected, but he's keeping up the theater for his side, so, it's kind of like a soap opera. That's the thing with politics. When you're watching it, you have to remember it's basically a soap opera. And you just have to differentiate on which ones matter and which ones are over dramatic fallings. Like, if you're watching a soap opera and they make these eyes for 8 seconds before they cut to break because something supposedly shocking just happened, that's overacting. That's soap opera. But when you enter into a situation, or you're watching a situation where a guy gets shot and falls over, that guy got shot. That is what happened. And so that's kind of the trick with politics, is that you've got to watch out for the soap opera eyes, and you've got to watch out for the melodramatic gasps and the fainting and the fake fighting. And you have to also be able to see when shots are being fired. You have to also be able to see when something real is happening. And that's kind of what it is, but I digress. He accused the Democrats for waging war on the Catholic Church. He said that the Obama administration's case against the nuns at the Little Sisters of the Poor and the opposition to the Democrat bill by the United Conference of Catholic Bishops is basically proof that they're declaring war on Catholics. And that's because Catholics are predominantly the pro-life movement. And that's the way it goes. And it is kind of sad that Democrats are more interested in proving a political point about supporting women than they are about proving a political point on supporting the First Amendment. And it's really amazing to me how people have... It's really interesting to me how people have kind of seen this swatch. We've seen this change in the Republican Party, if you will, where it's full of conservatives, and a lot of them, they are racist. I mean, let's be real, you all know one. And yet, you're seeing this alignment with liberty. And that's not something that's all that common for many Republicans. A lot of them think the law is the law, and it doesn't matter if it's infringing on your rights or if it is not right or immoral. It's the law, and you should follow it. And I think that's wrong completely. I mean, John Henry, give me liberty or give me death. I'm all about that. Martin Luther King, civil disobedience. But you have a lot of Republicans who are hardcore authoritarians, but yet you've got this opportunity. This whole Tea Party movement has presented this great chance to realign the Republican Party as the party of liberty. It has the opportunity to win independent votes and young Americans. They're poised to do that if they can just get the Republicans in the party to take the next few steps from constitutionalist to liberty. Because when you have Americans standing up and saying, I support the Constitution, I support the Bill of Rights, you have them saying, I support freedom of speech, I support freedom of religion, I support people being left alone by the government. I mean, it's being unmolested, no unreasonable searches and seizures, and for authoritarians to come out and say, I don't believe that the government should have the right to unreasonable searches and seizures of people, that's huge. Especially in a party where the law is the law and it doesn't matter if it's wrong, you're supposed to follow it. Where that's a mantra, where that's a thing. So the idea that we're there, we're getting there, we're almost there, we're so close. It's just a matter of having conversations about what rights are. And I think these lawsuits are a perfect example of that. The Hobby Lobby ruling where it failed, the Hobby Lobby law that failed with the Supreme Court ruling, the fact that Democrats are suing the nuns, and House Republicans are suing the president for overstepping his authority because he changed the Obamacare law I mean, I think that lawsuit's kind of dumb because his job was to make the law work. And just because they have built-in deadlines doesn't necessarily mean the president broke the law. I mean, I think that the fact that he's delaying this stuff is because it had to be delayed. I mean, the other option is he just doesn't say it's delayed and just keeps going about business as usual until it gets to work. But it is what it is. And then, you've got this IRS ruling where conservatives are going after Lois Lerner, saying that she targeted conservatives, picked them out of the crowd for this nonsense about the 501c3s, 501c4s, the nonprofit groups, saying that they are saying that they're overstepping their bounds and being political and stuff like that. I think the party is just so ripe with opportunity to be pro-liberty. It's right there. All people got to do is make it happen. And it's not that hard. We'll have more when we come back.
Hey, this is Alfonso Rachel with 20 Pound Sledge and PJTV Zone Nation, and you're listening to VLR.
Hi, this is Alan Bordius of theirfinesthour.net. Catch me here on VLR Monday nights and also on Tuesday nights on the Roundtable of Extreme Liberty.
All right, hello everybody. We are back after a short break. Now, what I want to talk about next is what everybody's been talking about, this plane crash in Ukraine. So, the biggest thing with this plane crash is that there is so much talk about what it means, who did it, who done it, who cares. I'm just kidding. It's actually a really big issue. It's just not as big as everybody thinks it is. Everybody's talking. I heard people say World War III. I heard people talk about the apocalypse, rapture. I've heard people say, Russia can't do this. So, there's no way they can get away with it now. One person said Obama's going to be forced to be a leader. All kinds of varying opinions all over the place. There's been people that have come out and said that they think it's the separatists. I've heard people say that it's got to be Putin and former KGB, former communist, etc., etc., etc. And I think it's healthy to have debates on issues, but as far as this goes, I think it's better if we talk a little bit more methodically about what's going on in the region. Namely, is kind of the way the evidence is pointing. And I think it's important to note that the evidence is not pointing to Russia. But we'll go through it. Let's just go through the nuts and bolts here first. Malaysian Airlines Flight 17 crashed in eastern Ukraine today. It had 295 people on board. It's 280 passengers and 15 crew. Now, people in Ukraine, there's all kinds of cell phone video that got out pretty quick, saying the Boeing 777 exploded in the air and then debris began to rain down. Ukrainian officials said that the debris, the wreck site was, it was like 10 miles, it covered about 10 miles. It's all over the place. And then you had President Obama very incredibly briefly touched on it, saying it could be a tragedy or it might be a tragedy. When people die, it's a tragedy. I don't know who let him slip up like that, but that was just a stupid moment. Just one of those "go home, Obama, you're drunk" moments. And then, ironically, Joe Biden came out and sounded eloquent. He said, apparently it had been shot down, not an accident, blown out of the sky. We see reports that there may have been American citizens on board. So, Joe Biden goes out there and gives us way more information than the president, and even declared it a crisis, unlike the president. So it was one of those moments where swing and a miss for Obama, and Biden picked up the layup on that one. I was pleasantly surprised. And by pleasantly, I mean if Biden gets any traction at all and actually runs for president, that would be hilarious, because I don't think it's possible for him to win, and the election cycle would be very entertaining if he did win the nomination. Now, one thing that's interesting is that CNN's reporting a radar system saw a surface-to-air missile system turn on, track the airplane right before it went down. So you've got this evidence of, yes, it was shot down. It was shot down in Ukraine. A surface-to-air missile system tracked it, shot it. Now, that means a couple of things. One, it's not an RPG on the shoulder. It's not something a Taliban dude with a rocket launcher could take down. A surface-to-air missile equipment, if you will, I don't really know the right word for that. Ordnance, I guess, would be the right word. It's like a tank. And I know you've all seen it on TV before or in video games. It's like a tank. It's big and blocky, except it's got this big square with several missiles lodged into it, kind of like a firework. And it's got, something like 8 to 16 missiles locked into it, and it fires them off into the air. Much bigger than an RPG. And the guidance system is better. All that stuff. So the idea that a bunch of farmers and Russian rebels, if you will, in eastern Ukraine did this becomes significantly more unlikely when you see what equipment was used. Now, the Ukrainian government is claiming that it was the separatists, that it was the rebels, the pro-Russian rebels, that blew it out of the sky for no reason. And this is, of course, because there have been several Ukrainian jets, AC-130s, cargo planes blown out of the sky. And so it is something... It's not far-fetched. The original reports were that it was a surface-to-air missile, so there's no way that it can be these rebels, because it wasn't a shoulder-mounted rocket. But that being said, the rebels claim to have seized up some surface-to-air missiles when it seized a military base in Donetsk. And the rebel leader for the pro-Russian insurgency claims that it did shoot down a plane about the same time that in Malaysia Flight 17 went down. And in the web post, it said Igor Girkin, who's widely known by his nom de guerre, the nom de plume, Igor Strelkov. He's the quote-unquote defense minister for the separatist movement, or excuse me, the separatist republic that is trying to get Russia to hold on to Ukraine. And he posted something on the web saying, "We warned you not to fly in our skies." And CBS News is reporting it, and they've got the cached version of this, of the post, showing it was them and everything. And the thing is that he's saying he shot down a plane. It's not necessarily this one, but there hasn't been reports of another plane that has been shot down. So the idea that another plane happened to go down in the same area is kind of ridiculous. There have also been conflicting reports that the plane was actually flying really low, something like 10,000 feet. But since it had been in the air for 2 hours, I find that to be highly unlikely. It should have been around 30,000 feet. For those of you who don't know, I've flown a lot internationally in my life, and you don't see a plane flying that low on a regular basis, or that far out from its destination. It was still headed to Malaysia. Now, I'm sorry if you can hear Audrey scratching back there. She's scratching for whatever reason. I don't know. But what interests me about this whole thing is that the Russian separatists in Ukraine have little to no reason to shoot down civilian aircraft. They really don't. I mean, what do they have to gain? You know, war. Huh, yeah. What is it good for? Absolutely nothing. In this case, it is nothing. This accomplished nothing for them. If anything, it could lead to them getting bombed by the U.S., which, that being said, if Russia decides to extend their umbrella over them, we might do nothing. Because if we attack Russian citizens, Vladimir Putin will smack down the U.S. I mean, as strong as the U.S. is, as much as I love my country, President Obama is not the pattern we need, so to speak. Now, what I think is interesting is that the people that had the most vested interest in shooting down this plane, the group that stand to gain the most by shooting down this plane, is the Ukrainian government. Now, I know a lot of people have speculated that it was Russia and it was Vladimir Putin and we should all blame him. I don't think Putin had anything to gain from this. I mean, sure, he does prod and poke the United States, like flying his armed stealth nuclear bombers over Alaskan airspace. Yeah, I mean, it makes sense that he would do things like that. But that's because there's little to no diplomatic or physical war-type ramifications for it. And so it's not, you know, he's usually very logical. And in this case, shooting down a civilian airliner is not logical. There is no rational explanation, something to be gained from Russia by shooting down a civilian aircraft, unless there was somebody important on that aircraft, which would have come out in the news reports by now. I think what is most interesting is that the government of Ukraine had the most to stand from shooting down this aircraft. If they did shoot this aircraft down, they would likely provoke the United States into doing something about the situation, and I think that is something they've desired all along. Ukraine, this new government that is the result of a minority of people in the capital city rioting to replace the pro-Russian government in Ukraine. I think that this government needs to solidify its hold on the people because, quite frankly, there's a reason that so many towns have left up the Soviet relics and the towns have voted to become their own countries or to become part of Russia in the case of the peninsula that seceded. And it's because these people are overwhelmingly pro-Russian. They are and have been former Soviets. They were part of the Soviet Union during its glory days. And many of the older people in these nations that were alive and remember the 80s and you know 70s, 60s, 50s, they remember that Russia used to be strong. The Soviet Union was strong. And now, to be Ukrainian is not to be from a strong country. It's not the proud country it once was. It is overwhelmingly corrupt. It is just not a very pleasant place to live. And it's not even something that you can even be very proud of. It is what it is. And I know that's kind of harsh and sad, but when you look at it, this country is full of people that are proud, but they don't have much to be proud of. Their country's not strong anymore. Their economy's not flourishing. They're not recognized as being great, even though they feel great. But Russia is. Russia still is. And so for them to become part of Russia would be something that would make them strong again, if you will. And I think that they obviously oppose the European-friendly government in Ukraine, in Kiev, in the capital. And when you look at what Ukraine had to gain from shooting the plane down versus the rebels versus Russia, the only party in the three possible suspects, the only person, the only group, the only country that had something to gain from this was the government of Ukraine. Now, granted, the CBS thing about them posting online, you trust their Russian translation, their Ukrainian translation, but it's one of these things where I don't believe for a second that this is as cut and dry as people are making it out to be, and I think that there was going to be lots of misinformation to come the next few days, because this is a complicated situation, and I think that it was the Ukrainian government. That's where I would put my money. They had the only thing to gain out of shooting down a civilian plane, and the only thing to gain would be getting the United States to help them take their country back, or at least secure what they have left with the civil unrest going on and everything. So I think that more likely than not, it's a strong probability that it was the separatist, and I think that's the report that's going to come out. But I can't help but look at this objectively and think that it's either really... See, what kills me is that there are two distinct possibilities. Either all three groups were moderately intelligent, and if that's the case, if they're not completely just brain dead, then it was the Ukrainian government, because they had something to gain from this, and they're the only ones. And then you have the other way of thinking, which is the one I usually use when I have to pick a side for any issue, and this is one of them. And that is that these people are all incredibly stupid, and so which group is the dumbest? Which group would be the dumbest to do this? Now, we've already established that the Ukrainian government had the most to gain, so that would make them the smartest to do this. So it can't be them, by that definition. And the Russian government had nothing to lose by doing this. They gained nothing, but they also lost nothing. So that eliminates them as being the dumbest, because the separatists had something to lose. If they shoot down the plane, they likely incur the wrath of the United States in one way or another. And with our weak leader, they might very well get away with it, but they stood the most to lose. They stood to lose the most. So if we go with the people are stupid theory, my money's on the separatists. If we go with the people aren't all incredibly stupid theory, then it's the Ukrainian government, because they had the most to gain. But I don't think Russia had anything to gain or lose in this situation, and so it would make no sense for them to have done it. It just is not logical at all. There's the only way that it could have been done by Russia is if it was a complete accident, which is not unheard of, actually, and I have a list, so let's go through it. Because a lot of you are young, and I'm young, and so we are not as well versed on modern history as we ought to be. And that is our own fault. It is the fault of our teachers, the fault of the system, blame whoever, but let's fix the problem, and that's what I'm going to do. So, when we're looking at this situation as we are, you can't help but think, okay, what's going to happen now? And the best way to see what's going to happen now is to see what happened before. And I don't mean right before, I mean in situations just like this one. And there are a few of us, for us to choose from. So I am going to point out a few. Namely, 1983, in September, the Soviet Union shot down an airline, Korean Air Flight 007, killing a U.S. congressman from Georgia, Larry McDonald. Ronald Reagan was president at the time, and he came out and made a speech condemning it as a horrific, inhumane criminal act, a catastrophe, and absolutely unforgivable, which is all fine and good when you're talking to a camera, but quite another when it comes to pushing big red buttons. And that's not to disparage Reagan. I think that he was smart not to launch an attack for something like this, but hindsight's 20/20, and I think what he did was stupid in retaliation. Reagan released classified documents proving that the Soviets were behind the attack, and in doing so, basically ensured that the Russians would have safer intelligence. And what I mean by that is that the Russians knew which lines were leaky, which walls had ears, if you will, and were able to clean it up. That's because the Japanese used to spy on Russian communications for us, and the Japanese claimed that once Reagan released these classified documents showing that the Soviet Union had shot down Korean Air Flight 007, that it decreased their effectiveness at listening to Russian communications by 60%. And that's huge. Not to mention, it accomplished nothing except, they did it, which was proved anyway when Boris Yeltsin came to power in Russia, and he released the classified documents showing that basically Soviets saw an unidentified aircraft flying into their airspace, and rather than try to contact it and establish identity, they shot it down like morons. And this led to Ronald Reagan releasing GPS technology to civilians, which made aircraft flight paths more accurate. They were less likely to stray into Soviet airspace with GPS technology equipped. And, of course, GPS technology should have been unlocked sooner, but the fact of the matter is Reagan's response to release these classified documents hurt American intelligence in the long run, and could have actually hurt our relationship with the Japanese by endangering them to the Soviets. So, there's that. And funny, the United States has actually done this before, too. And I'm completely serious. The United States shot down Iranian Air Flight 655 in 1988 on accident when that flight flew near the Persian Gulf. For those of you who are unaware, Persian Gulf is between Saudi Arabia and the Pakistan-Afghanistan region of the Middle East. Iran is right there as well. And it's the eastern sea from the Arabian Peninsula, and it feeds into the Indian Ocean. And so, that Airbus A300 was carrying around 300 people. It took off from a civilian and military airport, and it confused American soldiers, and they shot that plane down. Reagan and H.W. Bush called it an accident and a tragedy. The Iranians sued the United States, took us to international court, and they won an amount that today would be equal to $93.7 billion from the United States. $93.7 billion. We paid Iran almost $1 trillion because we could not identify the aircraft we shot down, killing 300 people. Around 300 people. So we've done literally this on accident before in the Persian Gulf. Not even near our borders. But we've done this before. So before people get too outraged about how horrible this is and how stupid it is, just remember that one of the greatest presidents in American history had this happen under their watch. That's just them's the breaks. And that's part of the downside of war, is that generally it involves a lot of incredibly stupid decisions. And so, in these two examples, the Soviet Union shot down a plane, and the United States released classified documents and hurt its intelligence. And when the United States shot down a plane, we had to pay almost $1 trillion to Iran in restitution. So, when an airplane is shot down anywhere in the world, and the United States is involved, it will hurt the United States, even if it's just U.S. passengers. So, food for thought. In 2001, however, the government of Ukraine shot down a Serbia Airlines Flight 1812. It was shot down by a Ukrainian missile. Now, whoever planned this flight was a complete idiot. Ukraine had been conducting a massive military operation, shooting 23 missiles at drones in that region, and Ukraine was forced to pay $15.6 million to the families of victims. So, when the United States shoots a plane down, we pay almost $1 trillion. When Ukraine does it, they don't even pay $1 billion. And that is the situation we find ourselves in. We want the greatest country on earth, and certainly the richest, if not also the most indebted, or at least close to it. We find ourselves in this predicament where an airplane carrying Americans was shot down in Eastern Europe. It was only 20 or so Americans, but the fact of the matter is, we are America World Police, and an airplane was shot down either by rebels or a foreign government. And what are we going to do about it? I've heard talk that President Obama has already talked to Putin. President Obama is considering more sanctions against Russia. And that's it. That's all we've heard out of the administration. Now, I've heard that Obama will be forced to bomb, as Clinton was in Kosovo, but since Obama doesn't have a sex scandal to distract the country from, I think that the bombings are probably unlikely. I also think that President Obama, with his "there's no place for war in the 21st century" nonsense, is probably not going to do any war waging, unless it involves drones, which would be kind of funny. But I don't think he's going to do anything. I don't think a single thing is going to happen. I think Obama's done. I think he's done. He's going to stay at home, he's going to fundraise, and he's going to try and get a Democrat into the office in 2016. I think that's it. I don't think he'll do a single thing about this. I don't think the U.S. military is going to get involved in anything. I think they're done. I think they're good. They're just going to come out and say hashtag don't shoot planes. Hashtag yes every missile. And I think that's it. I mean, a lot of people are probably saying too soon for the jokes. I don't care. There's nothing that's going to happen. Nothing. Nothing will happen from this. Obama's going to probably make a speech again tomorrow. He made a tiny one today, about 3 seconds long, about Ukraine. And he'll probably make one tomorrow. It'll be a little longer, a lot more convoluted. And that'll be the end of that. It's just, that's it. That's just it. There's not anything else to be said or done about it. Period. I mean, we live in a country today run by a man who doesn't know what he's doing, doesn't care what he's doing, and is not real big on foreign strength. And that's fine. I'm okay with not going to war and stuff, but at the same time, this is one of those situations where if it was Russia and they're shooting down civilian planes, we've got a problem. If it was Ukraine and they're shooting down civilian planes so we'll help them, we've got a problem. And if it was Russian separatists shooting down planes because they happen to fly there, then probably airlines and pilots have problems, which means Americans have problems, which means we all have a problem. Alright, folks, that is our show for tonight. I hope you enjoyed it. This is America Our Way. I am Dustin Hoyt. You're listening to Vigilant Liberty Radio, and we will see you next time.